sure, are Asian markets. Their oil is all Asian, almost all Asian market. So if the Saudis want to go through this the Strait of the Suez Canal, they have to use small ships, and they'd have to go around Africa. But even then they'd have to return by going around Africa to through the Suez Canal. So it's basically catastrophic for Saudi Arabia.
Yeah. I think, how do you find the way that Saudi Arabia may react? One of them would be doubling down, maybe attacking Yemen, which it doesn't seem that would work for them. The other one is somehow accepting, which would be a humiliation for Saudi Arabia. And the other one is talking to Yemen behind the scene, or making some sort of deal behind the scene, which it doesn't seem to me that Yemen would accept that, because they have to announce it. It's not just about Saudi Arabia. The United States, Saudi Arabia, and UAE all together put the siege on Yemen. And how do you see the reaction?
I First of all, it's very strange what to me the reason why the Saudis bombed the Yemeni international airports. And the airport is a civilian airport, and it was just an Iranian passenger plane. And the delegation came to Iran for the funeral. Saudi delegation participated as well. So for me, that itself was absolutely bizarre. Some say that the Americans put pressure on the Saudis. Again, very foolish. But I don't know. I don't think that the Saudis would bow down to Yemen that easily. I think it will probably come to, I think Yemen will probably start hitting tankers, and then the Saudis may bomb, and then Yemen may start firing missiles at Saudi oil installations. This could get pretty bad. Ultimately, I think Saudi Arabia will have to back down because they just to defeat Yemen. I mean, the Saudis and the entire region, Qatar, the Emirates, Kuwait, Bahrain, Turkey, Jordan, Egypt, everyone, and the entire West, they were supporting the genocidal war against Yemen. The UN Security Council, under Saudi pressure, passed a resolution against the government in Yemen. So they carried out a 7-year genocidal war. Of course, after a couple of years, Turkey and Qatar exited this sort of loose coalition because the Emirates and Saudi Arabia targeted Qatar and imposed a siege. But still, at the beginning, they were all helping to carry out this genocide and to strangle the Yemeni people. They bombed funerals. They bombed this massive funeral where hundreds of people were killed. They bombed school buses. There was an instance where they killed lots of kids, and and the West was helping them, providing them with weapons, and thousands of military advisors, especially British advisors, were helping the Saudis keep up. I mean, the British have been deeply involved in the genocide in Yemen and also the genocide in Gaza. The British military, it's uh, quite sinister. But ultimately, after 7 years, they failed. And after 7 years, when Yemen gradually began to develop its drone and missile program, they started targeting Saudi critical infrastructure. And that's what led to the ceasefire. So let's assume that the Saudis start bombing Yemen again. What is there to bomb? But if Yemen starts firing drones and missiles at the Saudis, at tankers, uh, at refineries, at petrochemical plants, at um, the pumping stations for the oil pipeline, at oil installations, then the damage to Saudi Arabia could be decisive, especially as the Persian Gulf is as it is. It could bring about instability in Saudi Arabia. So the Saudis they can bomb Yemen, But what is there to bomb? The Americans have already waged war against Yemen. The Saudis did it for 7 years and they failed. So all they can do is kill more kids and bomb more schools and school buses and bomb weddings and funerals, but they're not going to win. But then again, that's the same problem that the Americans have. They bomb schools, they bomb hospitals. They in the last few days they bombed the children's hospital in Ahvaz. They bombed bridges, but they can't win the war. So the same logic applies to Saudi Arabia as well. The Americans can't win the war, but they still continue the war. So logic, it seems, in the U.S. camp and the Western Empire and among its proxies is literally non-existent.
There are two sentiments about the war between Iran and Iran. One of them is that the United States in the coming days they're going to attack, they're going to escalate the attacks on Iranian soil. And the other one is the way that the United States somehow pushing for some sort of pause, as it was mentioned in that tweet of the head of Iranian parliament. He said that on one side they're pushing for some sort of pause, on the other hand they're sending a lot of weapons to the region. This is the same sign, as it was mentioned during the interview that Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi had 2 days ago. He said that they know what the United States is doing. At the same time, asking for some sort of ceasefire pause, they're preparing themselves for the next round of war. Is that the same sentiment right now in Iran?
Yes, there's no talk of any ceasefire. The Iranians are not going to accept a ceasefire. And the war will continue. Whether the United States escalates or not, it's going to continue unless the United States meets Iran's demands. And of course, the demands are the MOU, but they have to be implemented, not just accepted anymore. And the Iranian demands have increased. So the United States has put itself in a much more difficult situation than before. The Iranians are not going to give any concessions. There's not going to be some, I don't know, 5-day ceasefire, 10-day ceasefire, 20-day ceasefire, anything like that. And as you see, the Iranians are hitting the United States hard. Things are getting more difficult for the Americans because the Iranians are literally destroying U.S. capabilities in the Persian Gulf region. So the Americans have had to take their assets all the way back to Jordan. And now Iran is hitting Jordan with great precision. And that makes it very expensive for the Americans to continue waging war, because when they have to fly all the way from Jordan, and now they may have to take these assets from Jordan to somewhere even further away. That makes each the bombing campaign much more expensive. Not just fuel, but the planes need to be overhauled. It just makes it a lot more difficult, and of course, the Iranians are creating a lot of damage to the American fighting force. Every day, Iran has excellent intelligence, and it has lots of people on the ground who are collaborating with Iran in all of these countries. So, we don't know what will happen. I mean, I have no idea what Trump will do today, let alone tomorrow, next week. But the Iranians are prepared for all scenarios. If the Americans want to escalate, the Iranians will escalate. If the Americans want to target critical infrastructure, Iran can target much more critical infrastructure and much easier. It's much more easy for Iran because all of the critical infrastructure of the regimes in the Persian Gulf are right in front of Iran. They're alongside the Persian Gulf coast. I mean, sometimes people talk, about, and I said this before. People talk about the Saudis and others they'll build more pipelines. It doesn't matter if they build pipelines. All of the oil installations, all the gas resources and the oil energy resources are here. They have to be taken from here elsewhere. So they're all in front of Iran. They're electrical power plants. They're very few in number and very big. But Iran has like smaller electrical power plants spread out across the country. And Iran builds its own goods. So Iran can repair. So it's going to be much more difficult for the Americans to destroy Iranian infrastructure. It'll be costly. It'll be, the ultimate crime. But the Iranians can devastate far more assets and far more easily, and that will bring down the entire global economy. Because if that happens, then the Strait of Hormuz is irrelevant, whether it's open or closed. Because if there's no gas, if there's no petrochemicals, if there's no oil, if there's no helium, if there's no fertilizers, then who needs the Strait of Hormuz? So it would be catastrophic for the world economy. And Iran will not hesitate at all in destroying these if the United States uh, moves in the wrong direction. So no matter how this plays out, this is not going to end well for the United States. No matter how it plays out, it's going to end very bad. And even if the United States were to capitulate today and go back to the MOU, Iran is not going to open the Strait of Hormuz. It's not going to happen. They have to fulfill their obligations, and there will be extra obligations. There will be Yemen. Yemen, the siege will have to be lifted. Then there's Gaza. Gaza will have to be dealt with. So the more the United States violates its commitments, the more demanding Iran becomes. And now that Yemen has joined, this is going to make the problem even more urgent for the United States. And the United States does not have the military power to deal with Iran and Yemen at the same time. And then there's the issue of Iraq, because the resistance in Iraq is huge. They are very large in number and very well funded and very well armed. They're a force much larger. They're a force significantly larger than Hezbollah and all of its reserves. So, they could easily take Kuwait tomorrow. And, Iraq, historically, they have claims over Kuwait. And, if push comes to shove and they want Kuwait, I don't think that the Iranians would object to that. And then, of course, the rest of these regimes in the region, they are, Saudi Arabia now sort of surrounded, uh, and the others are. The UAE cannot use Fujairah now. When you've seen how many ships Iran has struck during the past few days. So none of these countries are in good shape. The United States is not in good shape. There are no good scenarios. If the United States ends this now, a lot of damage will still be caused to the global economy. But I don't think it's going to end at any time. At least for now, it's not going to end, and it may escalate. And it's all bad for Trump, but he's not the decision maker. Tucker Carlson says he's just a slave.
I think the targets are important as this at this stage of war, and we've learned that the United States has tried in one of the nuclear power plants. They tried to hit. It was in Darwin, in the state of Khuzestan. And last night we've learned that they're trying again, after trying to attack the nuclear power plant in Bushehr. Before last night, they were trying to hit it again. Is that going to put pressure? I don't know what is the communication between Iran and IAEA, because at least they can put pressure. They say we're going to get out of NPT. Is that going to happen?
Well, Iran has said that it's not interested in nuclear weapons. We have the fatwa, and that fatwa, as far as I know, currently stands. But remember what Dr. Larijani said, the martyr, Dr. Larijani. He said that if Iran faces an existential threat, Iran's nuclear posture would change. Dr. Kharazi also said that, another martyr, the former foreign minister. He also said that. So I think everything depends. What Iran will do depends on circumstances, but obviously Iran is going to use these attacks to at least expose the United States to the world and try to put pressure through the International Atomic Energy Agency. But that agency is Western dominated. If you look at the board uh, they have the majority vote. Western countries. It's not a democratic body. So with like South Korea, they can always get a majority. That's, the non-aligned movement, the global South, all of them combined, they're a minority. So it's not, these are, the UN, all these UN bodies or UN affiliated bodies, they are all designed in a way so that the West controls them. Not even Russia or China control them. They have influence, but the West controls them. So the IAEA is a tool, and it's not going to ever condemn the United States. But Iran has said that whenever critical infrastructure is targeted, we will retaliate. And what we're seeing for the last 9, 10 days is Iran is hitting the United States harder than the United States is hitting Iran. And the Iranian success rate is higher than the United States. The Iranians, as I told you before, they have lots of decoys. And the United States doesn't seem to have great intelligence. And Iran moves things around a lot. And the country is the size of Europe. And it's mountainous, and the terrain is, it's not flat land. But the United States is stuck in these like a few bases across the region, mostly flat land. They don't have many places to go. So Iran puts decoys all over the place, and they move things around. The United States is stuck in those bases. So the Iranians just hammer those bases, and it's 50 degrees sometimes, 50 some degrees with high humidity during the day. All that equipment, if it's not destroyed in the strike, it's left exposed in the heat and humidity. It's not a it's and the soldiers. I mean, this is it's not good at all for the United States. What's going on?
I think the attack on Jordan somehow changed the calculation on the part of the Trump administration, because this is the first time you're attacking, not only hitting the U.S. forces, but also hitting the helicopters, hitting the fighter jets there. It was something new. And then, as you've mentioned, IRGC said we're receiving a lot of intelligence from the army in Jordan, from the people in Jordan. And this is the reality of the society in these countries. All these, I assume that's the case for all these GCC countries as well, because the population is not that much connected with the leadership. They don't feel the same way. That's why you see Iranians are getting a lot of intelligence from the people in these countries. Is that the case?
Once the foreign editor of a very important Indian media outlet told me, we were at a conference, I think in China or South Korea, 8, 9 years ago, quite a long time ago. He told me that, and I'm not saying this is correct, but there is a strong element of truth in it. He said that the Indian government has more intelligence about all the countries in the Persian Gulf region than any Western intelligence agency. And he said the reason is because we have millions of people working there. So we're everywhere. He was saying to me, we're in the palaces, we're in on the streets, we're everywhere. Now you have millions of not just Indians, but people from all over the world working in these countries. The citizens are a small minority in the case of Qatar and the Emirates. And in Saudi Arabia, you have foreign workers. In um, Kuwait, you have many foreign workers. So there are lots of people. It's not just the citizens themselves who, many of them may be very angry that their governments have aligned themselves with the Israeli regime, or at least with the empire, or in some cases with the Israeli regime, literally. But so it's not just them, but it's also the foreign workers. So you have many, many millions of people. And of course, in Jordan, people recognize that the Jordanian government is, uh, probably the most obedient of all the regimes in the region to Israel and the United States. I mean, after all, the king of Jordan is, you know, uh, so so Iran can easily, Iran's intelligence is extraordinarily high. Iran's successes in its strikes are very high. The American successes are not very high, and it's very expensive for the Americans to continue this war. I mean, the logistics are a tremendously difficult problem, and the Americans can't settle down because they're constantly being struck. As I said, they've moved away from the Persian Gulf, Jordan. Now what are they going to do? They have to move perhaps to Israel or I don't know, Cyprus or somewhere. So they can't focus the way that they would want to on waging war against Iran, and that of course helps Iran uh, to better wage its war. So nothing of good is coming out of this for the United States. And right now, you have zero. The Iranians have been hitting lots of ships during the last couple of days that have been trying to go through the Strait of Hormuz. And these are ships that are trying to leave. Ships are not trying to enter. So that's another problem. That okay, let's say a few ships leave, nothing is coming in. And so you have almost nothing leaving the Strait of Hormuz. Now you're not going to have Saudi energy or fertilizers or other products, whatever it is that they export from the Red Sea going through the um, Bab al-Mandab. Every day the crisis gets worse. And this is being added to 4 months of accumulating shortages, which at the end of the day, the reason why Trump accepted the MOU was because he said we're 4 weeks away from running out of energy. And so let's say during the 2-3 weeks when the MOU was partially functioning, because the Americans were violating most of their commitments from the very start, but exports were leaving or oil was leaving the Persian Gulf, it didn't decrease the shortage. It just the shortage didn't grow further. So but let's say it was the more than average was leaving the Persian Gulf. Okay, let's exclude the first 2-3 days when Iran reclosed the Strait of Hormuz to balance to sort of cancel that extra oil. For the past 5-6 days, the shortages across the world are accumulating. In other words, the previous shortages are getting worse across the board, all goods. And then now you're going to have the Red Sea added to this. So the pace of in which the world is moving towards an economic cliff is quickening. So time is not on the side of Trump, and the fighting is not going well. Some say that Trump wants to carry out a land operation. It's possible. Of course, it's very difficult to envisage doing it in this heat. Some say he'll do it in a couple of months in the autumn. But by that time, I think the economy will be wrecked and anger and dissatisfaction in the United States will grow. And then you have the November elections. And if things get bad, then it'll be a wipeout. So I don't see a good scenario for the United States, no matter how you look at it, or for the Saudis, or for any of these regimes in the Persian Gulf. And it's not easy for us. But at the end of the day, Iran will come out on top. I have no doubt about that. And the axis of resistance.
Yeah, they're talking about Hark, Larak. Some on Fox News, I saw one of them is talking about the Qeshm Island. The Qeshm is so, the largest island in the Middle East, in the West Asia. It's not going to be that easy for them to go, and I don't know what is happening, but you see
And they're
these
all flat. They're all close to the Iranian shore. So the Iranians don't just have to fire those long-range drones and missiles. They can fire short-range missiles. Iranian troops, they have ground forces. They have their own drones, and they have like the drones that Hezbollah uses, for example. They have their own equipment. So once these people come into the islands or the mainland, it's not going to be the drones that you see being fired into Kuwait or the missiles fired at Bahrain or whatever that will be possibly used. It'll be far larger numbers of drones and rockets that'll just come down raining on them. This is flatland. It's exposed. It's very close to the Iranian shore. You can easily start, you can easily pound them from different directions, from the mountains. It would be, and what impact would it have on Iran? Nothing. I mean, okay, you take Khark Island. Well, the Americans have already imposed a siege on Iranian ports. So oil is not going to the global market. So whether they take the island or they don't take the island, we're not having exports from the Strait of Hormuz. So they're only going to bring their troops in to say that I mean, what they want to do is to take land and then tell the Iranians we'll only leave if you give us concessions. But that's crazy. There's not a chance in the world that the Iranians will do that. The Iranians' number one strength is its ground force. And its ground forces have been equipped with missiles and rockets, and they have their own underground bases, and they're using the geography to their advantage. I mean, didn't they learn from the fact that Iran has been able to use all these underground missile and drone bases to defeat them? Haven't they come to the recognition that the Iranian military doctrine is as such that they just simply, I mean, it's a brilliant strategy. But the Americans should have learned by now that the Iranians will defeat them. So, you can take the Khark Island. Okay, Iran can't export oil, but Iran isn't exporting oil. So, and then you can bring your forces in. The Iranians can kill them much more easily, or capture them, and then you have a completely new situation. And meanwhile, the global economy is sinking because the clock is ticking. I mean, and whatever is going to happen, whatever happens, no oil, no energy, no fertilizers, no petrochemicals are going anywhere. And then the Red Sea is added to this. It's just crazy. But, we're dealing with an irrational, the West is completely irrational, the elites. They have no sense of morality, as we saw in Gaza and Lebanon and across Palestine. They have no sense of honor, as we see how they negotiate and they tear up their deals with Iran on multiple occasions, with others as well. It's just it's an empire that's